Have you ever woken from a nightmare heart pounding, unsure if what you saw was real or imagined? In Japan, they say there is a creature that feeds on such dreams, a beast summoned to consume your fears, leaving your soul in peace. They call it Baku. I first learned about the Baku, not from a book or a story, but from my grandmother. She sat me down at the edge of my futon when I was a child, long after the lanterns were blown out. She touched my forehead gently and whispered, "If the dreams ever get too dark, call the Baku. Say, 'Baku-san, come eat my dream. Come.'" That night I dreamed of drowning, of shadows with teeth. But I also dreamed of something vast and glowing with the tusks of an elephant and the claws of a tiger. It hovered beside my bed like a spirit wrapped in fog. And I remember even now, the way my breath slowed and my heart stopped racing. The nightmare was gone. Devoured. In Japanese folklore, the Baku is not like other yokai. It is not a trickster or a curse. It is a protector, strange but benevolent. They say its body is made from the spare parts of other animals, the trunk of an elephant, the tail of an ox, the paws of a tiger. Some call it a chimera, others a god of dreams. The legend of the Baku stretches back centuries, possibly originating from ancient Chinese myths before taking on its own shape in Japan. And, for generations, children across the country have invoked its name in the dark, some as a game, others in true desperation. To call the Baku is to surrender your nightmare, to offer it up like incense, and hope the beast is hungry. But there's a warning too. If you call the Baku too often, they say it will not stop with your nightmares. It will eat your hopes, your joy, your dreams for the future. You will wake, feeling empty, dreamless, a hollow shell walking through daylight. Because the Baku hungers endlessly, not just for terror, but for everything that lives inside your imagination. I remember one winter when I couldn't sleep for days. Night after night, the same dream returned: a burning house, a scream I could not place, and the scent of smoke that lingered even after I opened my eyes. Desperate, I called the Baku. Every night. Every time I closed my eyes, the dream stopped. So did everything else. I stopped writing. I stopped drawing. I didn't daydream anymore. Food tasted dull. Laughter felt distant. It was like someone had muted the world. My grandmother noticed first. She placed a bowl of miso in front of me and said, "You've given the Baku too much." "What do I do?" I asked. "You wait," she said. "And you dream even if it hurts. You feed your soul again." That spring I forced myself to imagine. Even if it meant seeing fire again. Even if it meant waking with tears. And slowly, the colors returned. The Baku is a symbol of protection, but also of balance. It teaches us that fear must be faced, not simply erased. That dreams, even the painful ones, are part of who we are. There's something universal in that idea. In almost every culture, there's a creature that haunts the night. But while most frighten, few protect, the Baku stands apart. It does not chase, it waits to be called. It does not punish, it consumes. I've spoken to others who remember the Baku differently. One man told me that when he was a boy, his mother drew a picture of the beast and placed it above his pillow. He swore that it glowed faintly on nights when he cried. Another said his grandfather carved one into wood, saying it was their family's guardian spirit. Even today, modern Japan hasn't let the Baku go. You'll find its likeness in manga, in plush toys sold at temples, and animated films. It has become both monster and mascot. And maybe that's fitting, for what creature better bridges fear and comfort? The Baku reminds us that the night is not only full of terror, but of possibility. That there are ancient forces we can call upon if only we believe. And that sometimes the things that seem most monstrous are the ones that hold us closest in our weakest moments. When I see images of the Baku now, its great sleepy eyes, its strange patchwork form, I don't see a monster. I see memory, I see resilience. I see the part of myself that dared to hope again. And perhaps that's what myths are for. Not just to scare or entertain, but to help us hold on. To give our fears shape so that we might name them. And in doing so, call something greater into the dark. Tonight, as I lay down to sleep, I still whisper the old words, sometimes in jest, sometimes not. Baku-san, come eat my dream. But only if it's too much, only if I cannot carry it. Because now I know dreams are worth keeping no matter how strange. They say if you walk through the forests of the north, through the frozen pines and whispering winds, you might hear a child calling. A faint, broken voice echoing like frost on glass. Do not answer, do not turn back, because what you hear may not be a child at all. It may be a Mylingsmage. When I first traveled to Sweden, I wasn't looking for ghosts. I was looking for silence. I had left behind a city that never slept, a heart too loud with grief, and a body that hadn't rested in years. I rented a small cabin near a quiet village, surrounded by snow, hoping to disappear. It was there, in that long northern night, that I first heard the cry. At first I thought it was an animal, a fox maybe. But then it came again, soft, high, and unmistakably human. I stepped outside. Nothing but trees, nothing but silence. But the feeling remained, that chill under the skin, the sense of being watched. I told the locals the next day. They went still. It's the Myling one, woman said quietly. Don't follow it. Don't speak to it. She told me the story. Centuries ago, before Christian law protected every life, children born out of wedlock were seen as shameful burdens. Some women, desperate, poor, terrified, would take the child into the woods and bury it in secret, believing no one would know. But someone always knows. The spirit of the murdered child would rise, not with innocence but with rage. The Myling, they said, roamed the forests at night, calling for someone, anyone, to carry them to a grave. They would climb upon your back, heavy and cold, and demand you walk until you reach sacred ground. With each step, the Myling grew heavier. If you could not carry them the full way, if you collapsed under their weight, they would tear you apart and drag your soul to the place they were never allowed to rest. Some versions say they wail outside homes, with children jealous of what they never had. Others say they haunt their mothers forever until her guilt consumes her. It's a terrifying story, but it's also something else, a confession wrapped in legend. A memory of shame, pain, and secrecy passed down as warning, and perhaps as mourning. I began seeing the Myling in dreams. Not as a monster, but as a small, pale figure watching me from the edge of the woods. Not coming closer, just waiting. One night, the power went out. The forest was darker than I had ever known. Even the moon hid. And there, just beyond the tree line, I saw the figure. Small, thin, unmoving. I did not speak. I did not run. I lit a candle and set it at the window. In the morning, the snow was untouched, but the air felt lighter, as if something had passed through and left in peace. There's something deeply tragic about the Myling. Beneath the horror lies a truth we don't want to face, that some children are forgotten, cast aside, and their stories never told. My guide in the village once said, "The Myling isn't just a ghost. It's a memory with no one to remember it." I carry that line with me, because folklore, I've come to believe, is not just about scaring people. It's about remembering what we'd rather forget. It's about turning pain into story so we can survive it. When we tell tales of the Myling, we're not just talking about a haunted forest. We're talking about a society's failure to protect its most vulnerable. About guilt that echoes through generations. And maybe about a child who still hopes someone will carry them home. I left Sweden with more than I came with. The silence I had sought gave way to something deeper, a reverence, a humility. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the wind brushes the glass, I sometimes think of that candle and the small shadow that didn't knock. The Myling is still out there, in the trees, in the snow, in the stories we whisper when no one wants to remember. So if you ever hear a voice in the northern dark, a soft child's cry asking for help, ask yourself, can you bear the weight of memory? Or will you walk on heart heavy, hoping someone else will answer? There's something about the English countryside, its rolling hills, crumbling ruins, and ancient footpaths that makes you feel like you're walking through a place where the past never truly ended. And if you walk alone at night under fog and moon, they say you may see it. A black dog, larger than any hound you've ever known, eyes glowing red like dying embers, silent, watching. They call it the Black Shuck. I first heard the name in Norfolk from an old man repairing his boat by the docks. I had asked about local legends. He paused, looked around, and said simply, "Watch the cliffs at night. Some things walk that shouldn't." The black shuck is one of England's most enduring phantoms. Stories of the spectral dog stretch back centuries, especially across East Anglia, Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire. Always the same, a giant black hound, eyes like fire, a silent step, and a presence that brings death, disaster, or warning. Some say the shuck is a demon sent to punish sinners and terrify the wicked. Others claim it's a guardian, a silent protector of lonely travelers. But all agree on one thing: if you see it, once your life will never be the same. I remember the first time I thought I saw it. It was dusk. I was walking a lonely country lane just outside Bungay, under a sky bruised with storm. The hedgerows were high. The birds were silent. And suddenly there, at the edge of the path, a shape, too large to be a dog, too still to be a man. Its eyes caught the last light of the sun, red, unblinking, and then it was gone. No sound, no howl, just mist. That night I dreamed of a church, old, crumbling, thunder overhead, and the dog inside, scorch marks on the floor, a bell crashing from the steeple. I thought it was just my imagination stirred by stories and shadows. But then I found the record. August 4th, 1577, St. Mary's Church, Bungay. Historical accounts describe a violent thunderstorm during morning service. Lightning struck the tower. The doors burst open. A great black dog charged through the nave. It killed 2 parishioners and left scorch marks on the stone that remain to this day. Witnesses described the beast as massive, spectral, with flaming eyes, and no sound as it moved. The same day, 12 miles away in the village of Blithburgh, a nearly identical event occurred. A black dog, a shattered church door, a collapsed steeple. The townspeople called it the Devil's Dog. Coincidence, mass hysteria, or something older walking between storms. The black shuck appears not just in medieval lore, but again and again across the centuries. English soldiers in World War I swore they saw the hound pacing no man's land before an ambush. In the 1970s, hikers in Suffolk claimed a black dog led them safely from a sudden fog. And today, travelers still report glowing eyes in the hedgerows, silent footsteps behind them, and that ancient sense of being watched. But here's what's strange: the shuck doesn't always bring death. Some stories tell of it appearing before tragedy like a warning. Others speak of it walking beside the grieving, keeping them company. One woman told me she saw it the night her father died, standing at the gate, not menacing but still, waiting. And when she opened the door, it vanished. Maybe the shuck is not a monster. Maybe it's a memory that walks. A spirit bound not to one soul but to a place, to the grief and history soaked into the land. A guardian of forgotten paths. A relic of older fears. Some folklorists connect the shuck to Norse mythology brought to Britain by Viking settlers. The god Odin was said to be followed by a spectral black dog, his guide in battle and death. Perhaps the shuck is a shadow of that companion, still roaming the lands where longboats once came ashore. Or perhaps it is older still, a creature born of the land itself, shaped from storm and sorrow. The more I learned, the more I began to wonder what we're really afraid of when we tell stories of black dogs. Is it death? Or is it the silence before it? The sense that something knows before we do, that the darkness is not empty but aware. The English have long had a complicated relationship with death. Stoic, resigned, unspoken. Perhaps the shuck is the shape of what we cannot name, fear made visible just for a moment before it slips back into the fog. One night before I left the coast, I walked again near the cliffs. No lantern, no music, just wind and my own breath. And there it was, in the distance, still, tall, watching. I did not run, I did not speak. I bowed my head just slightly, a gesture of respect. And when I looked again, the path was empty. Whether I saw the shuck or simply the shadow of my own thoughts, I'll never know. But the weight of it stayed with me. So, if you ever find yourself alone in the English countryside, and the air goes still and your dog refuses to walk further, and the mist thickens just before the hedgerow, look carefully. And if you see 2 glowing eyes, red as flame, do not scream, do not run. It may not be there to harm you. It may simply be watching, as it always has. In the far north, where the land folds into ice and silence, the dead do not always stay buried. In Iceland, they have a name for them: Draugr. They are not ghosts, not in the way we often imagine them. They are not souls adrift in sorrow. No, The Draugr is something colder, more deliberate, a revenant, a corpse that refuses to rest. The first time I heard the word, it was spoken in a whisper. I had asked a storyteller in Akureyri about Iceland's most feared legend. He didn't pause. He simply said, the Draugr, the dead who remember. Legend says that Draugr were once warriors, kings, or landowners, those who in life were greedy, angry, or obsessed with control. And when they died, they refused to give up that control. They held so tightly to their wealth, their grudges, or their homes, that their bodies never rotted. Instead, they rose. A Draugr can appear solid, corpse, pale, bloated, reeking of rot, or shadowy, faceless, wrapped in frost and rage. It walks at night. It crushes bones. It curses the land. Livestock die. Children fall ill. And those who see it rarely survive the encounter. They say it can enter dreams, that it speaks your name before you hear the knock on your door, that you know it's near when the air turns bitter and the lights flicker. I was staying in a remote farmstead near Holar, surrounded by valleys, where the wind moves like a whisper from another time. The house had protective runes carved into every beam. I thought it was charming. The locals did not smile. One night I woke to the sound of hooves, but there were no horses, just silence, then a thud, like something heavy dragging across the roof. I didn't go outside. The next day the farmer asked me plainly, "Did you feel it?" I nodded. He told me about his great-grandfather who had been buried with a sword across his chest to prevent him from rising. But he still came back, the man said almost without emotion, until the priest sealed the mound with fire. Many Icelanders today will tell you it's just folklore, just stories. But even the skeptics avoid certain hills, certain caves, certain names. The Draugr is not just a monster, it is a reflection of unresolved grief, of bitterness that hardens into something unholy, of what happens when we cannot let go, not in life and not in death. And in a land where daylight vanishes for months at a time, it's not hard to imagine something stirring beneath the snow. One tale speaks of a rich landowner who mistreated his workers and died with curses on his name. Days after his burial, livestock began to disappear. Footprints appeared in the snow, but never led away, only toward his old house. Then, the servants began to vanish. When the villagers exhumed his grave, they found it empty except for blood. The entire house was burned. Some stories say the Draugr swells to the size of giants, crushing doors and bones alike. Others say they ride ghost horses across the hills, wailing like wind. But the worst stories are quieter. They speak of the Draugr whispering into your dreams, convincing you to walk outside, to open the cellar, to dig. And when you do, you find it waiting. I once held a medieval Icelandic manuscript, faded, torn, but still legible. It spoke of binding spells, of runes carved into iron, of how to stake a body so it cannot rise. And in the margin, a note scrawled in panic, "He still moves." What struck me most is how human the Draugr is. It is not a beast born of wildness. It is us if we let our worst emotions rot us from within. Greed, hatred, pride, and the refusal to forgive. One elderly woman I met near Lake Mivan told me she speaks aloud to her dead each winter. Just in case. So they don't forget who they were, she said. So they don't get angry. I asked her if she believed in the Draugr. She said nothing for a long time, then simply, "I believe the land remembers." I think about that often. That the earth itself might hold memory, echo, and pain. That the hills we walk might hum with secrets. And that in Iceland, where volcanoes breathe and the ground splits without warning, perhaps the boundary between the living and the dead is not so strict. The Draugr for me became more than a tale. It became a metaphor, a question. What parts of ourselves have we buried but not let go? What rage walks within us long after the wound is healed? And if we're not careful, might it rise? So if you ever feel a chill wind in a warm room, or hear hooves where there should be none, or wake to your name spoken in a voice not your own, do not follow, do not dig, do not answer. The dead may not want rest, but they will always remember. In the dark folds of the Appalachian Mountains where the forests grow ancient and the mist never fully lifts, there is a creature that walks between worlds. They call it the Wampus Keija. Part panther, part spirit, part curse, and entirely terrifying. I first heard the tale in a small Tennessee town where the mountains feel close enough to touch. An old man at a gas station saw my notebook and asked, "You writing about the cat?" I told him I didn't know what he meant. He leaned closer and whispered, "She's still out there." 6 eyes, no sound, just breath and fire. The Wampus cat legend is rooted deep in Cherokee folklore. Some say it began with a woman, a warrior's wife, who defied tribal law. She wanted to see what only men could, the sacred ceremony of war and transformation. So she hid under the pelt of a mountain lion and crept near the fire. But the shamans sensed her. As punishment, the spirits cursed her. She would forever bear the skin she wore, trapped between woman and beast, doomed to wander the woods as a warning. 6 eyes to see the truth, no voice to speak it, only the scream of vengeance. Other versions say the Wampus cat is a witch transformed by dark magic, jealous, enraged, and powerful, or a guardian spirit protecting sacred land, or a demon drawn to grief and blood. Regardless of the version, the fear remains. They say you know she's near when the forest goes silent. No crickets, no wind, just pressure like the world holding its breath. And then yellow eyes, watching, always watching. I spent 3 nights in a cabin near the Smoky Mountains chasing the story. Locals left food on their porches in case she's hungry. Children wore necklaces of stone and bark. And no one entered the woods after dark. One night I heard it. Not a growl, not footsteps, but breathing, deep, rhythmic, like something massive just beyond the tree line. I didn't see her, but I didn't sleep again that night. Stories of the Wampus cat aren't just campfire tales. They stretch back generations. Soldiers during the Civil War wrote in journals of a screaming panther that walked like a man. Miners spoke of glowing eyes in the depths. Hikers even today report claw marks on trees far too high for any known animal. But beyond the fear, there is something else: sadness. Every version of the tale begins with betrayal. A woman seeking knowledge, a soul transformed by grief, a curse born of silence. The Wampus cat is not just a monster, it's a mirror of how we punish curiosity, of how women's voices were once feared and silenced, of how pain twists when left unheard. I spoke with a Cherokee elder who told me the old name, Igwa, a spirit that sees beyond the veil, not evil, just angry, ancient, and sacred. She's not hunting, he said. She's remembering. That line stayed with me, because I began to wonder, what if the Wampus cat isn't here to harm us? What if she is here to remind us of what was lost, of who we cast aside, of the spirits we ignore? The mountains of Appalachia hold more than trees and trails. They hold memory, blood, bones. And every now and then something wakes. The Wampus cat legend has shifted over time, taken by pulp novels, comic books, horror films, often portrayed as a savage beast. But the original stories are quieter, heavier. They speak of justice, of sorrow, of transformation. One tale tells of a girl who disappeared after her village burned. Years later, hunters claim to see a giant cat circling the ruins, howling not with rage, but with mourning. Another speaks of a woman wronged by her own kin. Her body was never found, but her cries echoed across the hills each new moon. Sometimes the Wampus cat is said to guide lost children out of the woods, to stand guard over burial grounds, to vanish before sunrise, leaving only paw prints in frost. A curse, a guardian, a warning. Perhaps she is all three. When I left the mountains, I felt her still, in the way shadows moved, in the quiet between heartbeats, in the knowing that some stories never end, they only sleep. The Wampus cat is not a myth to be solved. She is a presence, a force, a memory etched into bark and stone. So if you find yourself walking a narrow trail as dusk falls, and the birds go quiet, and the trees seem to lean closer, and you see eyes that reflect no light, don't run, don't speak, don't disrespect her name. Because what walks beside you may not be hunting. It may simply be watching, waiting for someone who finally understands. And if you do understand, if you feel her pain, then walk gently. The mountains remember, and so does she. In the endless white silence of Siberia, there is a creature that drifts between shadow and wind. A nightmare whispered by the Evenki and the Yakut. A demon of frost and stillness. They call it the Uliger. The name changes from one village to another sometimes. Uliger. Sometimes Chakir. Sometimes simply the one who watches at night. I first came across it in a story told by an old woman who lived in a wooden cabin near Yakutsk. She spoke slowly, in a blend of Russian and native tongue as the snow howled outside. "We don't see it," she said, "but the forest does. And the children feel it. The Uliger is no ordinary beast. It has no single form. To some it is a massive owl with the face of a starving child. To others it is tall and thin as a pine, walking on reversed legs, with a mouth that never closes. Some say it has no body at all, only eyes, thousands of them blinking from within trees. But the stories agree on one thing: it comes for children. Specifically those who wander too far or cry too long or ask questions adults fear to answer. I asked why. The old woman did not blink. Because it feeds on loneliness, and children are full of it. There's a bitter truth there, one I didn't expect to find in the snow. The Uliger is said to appear just after twilight, when the fire burns low, when your breath freezes in front of your lips. It doesn't knock, it doesn't howl. It watches, it waits, and then it takes. Some say it steals only your shadow, leaving the body behind hollow and wide-eyed. Others say it leads you into the woods, whispering your name in your own voice. By the time the search party finds you, there's nothing but a trail of soft, bare footprints that end in a circle of ice. I spoke to a reindeer herder who claimed to have seen it once as a child. His sister had vanished during a snowstorm. They found her coat, her shoes, and beside them, long feathers darker than the night sky. He never spoke her name again. In old Evenki tradition, shamans would carve runes into the trees and sing to the forest to keep the Uliger away. Offerings were made: bones of birds, pieces of silver teeth of wolves. Even today, in remote places, you'll see small totems tied to branches, gifts for something unseen. What fascinated me most, though, was the story of its origin. One tale says the Uliger was once a child abandoned during a famine. Her family left her with a piece of bread and a prayer and walked into the storm without her. She did not die. She changed. Another tale says she is a dream turned sour, a spirit born from the grief of a mother who lost all her children to the cold. Either way, she became hunger. But unlike other monsters, the Uliger doesn't rip or devour. She empties, slowly, quietly, like frost. I read a journal from a Soviet explorer stationed in the East during the 1930s. He wrote of a strange epidemic among children, perfectly healthy one day, then withdrawn mute, staring into space. They look at me, he wrote, but I don't think they see me. It's as if something else is inside. The locals told him to burn a branch of pine, to sing an old lullaby, to whisper apologies to the night. He didn't listen. He disappeared 2 weeks later. Some say the Uliger is only real in dreams, that she drifts into the minds of the lonely and feeds on sorrow until there is nothing left. One girl I met in Novosibirsk claimed she dreamed of her dead brother every night until he stopped speaking and began only to watch. One morning she woke with frost on her pillow and a single black feather beneath her blanket. I don't know what I believe, but I know what I felt. In the coldest places of the world, silence has weight. Shadows have intention. And the line between spirit and snow is thinner than ice. The Uliger is not just a creature. She is a question. What happens to grief that is never named? What becomes of sorrow when we leave it out in the cold? She is loneliness made flesh. She is the fear no one sees. She is the hunger of forgotten children. I left Siberia with one memory burned deep. It was my last night. I stood outside watching the stars blur with snow. And then I heard it. Not a growl, not a whisper. A breath, like mine but not mine. I turned. Nothing but the trees. They seemed closer. And I remembered what the old woman said.
You don't see it, but the forest does.
So if you ever find yourself in the far north, where the night lasts weeks, and the fire burns low, and the frost creeps toward your door, leave something behind, a song, a kindness, a light. Because if the Uliger comes, she will not knock. She will wait and watch. And if you are lonely enough, you might go with her. There are roads in Central America that locals refuse to walk after sunset. Not because of wild animals or bandits, but because of what walks beside you when you're alone. She is beautiful until she turns, and by then, it's too late. They call her the Segua. I first heard her name in a mountain village near Cartago, Costa Rica. The innkeeper saw the direction I was walking and crossed himself. "Don't follow women at night," he said, "even if they're beautiful, especially if they are." At first, I thought it was just a cautionary tale, a warning wrapped in folklore. But as I listened, the details grew darker, specific, personal. She walks the lonely roads, they said. She appears to young men with wandering hearts. She promises love, then takes everything. According to legend, the Segua appears as a breathtaking woman. Long, dark hair, shimmering skin, eyes like fireflies. She walks just ahead of you on the road, never looking back. You're drawn to her. You call out. She slows, inviting. But when she finally turns, her face changes. No longer human, but the skull of a horse. Hollow eyes, rotten teeth, and a mouth that laughs without breath. Some say her body stays perfect as her head transforms. Others claim the entire illusion collapses, leaving behind a creature of mist and bone. Either way, the men she ensnares rarely return the same. Some vanish. Others lose their minds. Those who survive speak only in fragments. "She kissed me," one man said, "and my soul bled out through my lips." The origin of the Segua is tangled. Some say she was a woman scorned by a faithless lover who made a pact with the spirits of the jungle to punish all men like him. Others say she is older, pre-Columbian, a manifestation of the forest's rage against colonial invaders, a warning to those who take what isn't theirs. What's certain is that the Segua is always tied to desire, to temptation, to betrayal. She is not just a monster. She is justice with claws. I spent 3 nights in the highlands listening to stories, each one different yet identical. A man, a road, a woman, a beautiful voice, a slow turn, and then nothing. But it was the 4th story that chilled me. A woman in her 60s told me that her brother had disappeared one summer night, decades ago. They found his hat near a river bend and nothing else. But the next morning, in the dirt near the path, someone had drawn a horse skull in ash. No one had spoken his name since. "I don't think she kills," she said softly. "I think she consumes what you are. She leaves the shell." I asked why she only targets men. The woman didn't hesitate. "Because they don't listen." There's something deeply symbolic in the tale of the Segua. She is punishment, but also warning. A reflection of how desire can blind, how beauty can be a mask, and how harm often comes not with a roar but with a smile. In some versions, the Segua is said to trap her victims in a dream where she repeats their worst mistake over and over. A lie, a betrayal, a broken promise, until they scream to forget. Others say she leads them into the jungle, then fades, leaving them to be claimed by something worse. But in rare stories, she changes. One boy told me that his grandfather had once seen her by the riverside, but he didn't chase her. He simply bowed his head and walked past. She smiled, the boy said, and let him live. It made me wonder, is the Segua only vengeful when disrespected, when pursued, when desired, but not understood?
Is she a monster?
Or is she a mirror, a reflection of what we deserve when we refuse to see past the surface? A guardian of sacred spaces, a spirit tired of being taken for granted. On my last night, I walked a narrow path lined with bamboo and moonlight. I did not expect anything. But halfway down the road, I saw her. Hair long as night, dress flowing like mist, feet bare on the stones. She did not look at me, and I did not follow. I stood, silent, heart pounding. She walked slowly, then vanished into fog. No scream, no transformation, just gone. And I realized perhaps the Segua comes not to harm but to test, to ask a single question. Will you chase what you do not understand, or will you honor what you fear? In the end, she is not just a woman of the night. She is the voice behind the rustling trees, the warning in your pulse, the shadow of every choice made in lust or pride. So if you ever walk a lonely road in the mountains of Central America, and a woman appears glowing in moonlight, do not call to her. Do not run toward her beauty. Do not ask her to turn, because if she does, you may never see your own face the same way again. Long before angels and devils were familiar names, long before kings etched their triumphs in stone, there was a woman who haunted the night. Not a mortal woman, not a goddess, but something else. They called her Lamashtu. In ancient Mesopotamia, in the lands of Sumerikad, Babylon, she was whispered about with dread. Her image carved into clay tablets, her name scratched into protective spells, her presence feared more than death. She was the devourer, the taker of infants, the nightmare that came not in dreams, but in the stillness before dawn. I first encountered her in a museum archive in Istanbul. A fragment of a clay tablet, broken but clear. It depicted a winged female with bird-like feet, lion's teeth, and a serpent in each hand. The label was simple: Lamashtu, demoness of the womb. But she was more than a demon. She was a force. The ancients believed Lamashtu stalked pregnant women and newborns. She would slip through doors unnoticed. She would drink from the womb. She would poison milk. She would breathe sickness into the breath of babies. And worse, she did it for pleasure. Not because she was commanded, not because she served a dark lord, but because she wanted to. She was unique in that way. In a world where most demons obeyed, Lamashtu acted of her own will. Her cruelty was self-made, her hunger personal. That terrified them. To guard against her mothers, carried amulets. Midwives recited complex chants. Priests invoked Pazuzu himself, a fearsome demon, to chase her away. Imagine that one terror used to repel another. On one tablet, I saw a child's crib was surrounded by 7 figures each, holding symbols of light. And above them, the looming shadow of Lamashtu wings, spread claws reaching. The caption read, "She comes when love is greatest to feast, where joy is new." There is something deeply human in this fear. The vulnerability of birth, the helplessness of sleep, the terror of losing what we've only just received. Lamashtu embodied all of it, but I couldn't help wondering, where did she come from? Some scholars argue she was once a goddess cast down, a deity of wild nature, turned malevolent when forgotten. Others believe she was always dark, a personification of maternal fear. But I found one tale buried in a lesser-known temple record that told a different story. It spoke of a time before cities, when spirits still walked the earth. Lamashtu was a guardian once not of humans, but of the space between birth and death. She chose which children would live, which would not. But over time, her role soured. People cursed her when children died. They feared her judgment. And so as belief warped, so did she. She became what they saw: a predator, a thief, a demon. It made me pause. How many of our monsters are born not from darkness, but from blame? Lamashtu fascinates me because she is not a simple evil. She is maternal in shape, but monstrous in form. Feminine, yet feared. Powerful, yet cast out. She exists in the cracks between what we want to believe and what we dread might be true. During my time in Iraq, I visited a ruined ziggurat where locals warned me not to speak her name aloud. "She listens," a boy said. "She remembers who forgets her." That night, I dreamed of a dark corridor lined with clay tablets. One by one, they cracked, shattered, and from the last one, something crawled, feathered, limping, laughing. I woke breathless. In modern times, Lamashtu is faded. She's a footnote in mythology books, a glyph on broken pottery. But I wonder, how much have we truly left her behind? Don't we still fear for our children? Don't we still whisper prayers over their sleep? Don't we still blame something, anything, when life is taken too soon? In ancient Babylon, they didn't call it fate. They called it Lamashtu Esgar. They gave fear a name, and in doing so tried to fight it. There's power in that. Today, archaeologists uncover her amulets in cradles, her symbols etched beside lullabies. Her story baked into bricks thousands of years old. She was hated, yes, but she was remembered. And maybe in that memory, she found immortality.
So if you ever wake in the middle of the night and the shadows feel thicker and the silence feels hungry, remember this.
She is older than your gods. She is older than your fears. She is Lamashtu. And though her wings may no longer cast shadow over your crib, she still walks in stories. She still waits in silence. And sometimes, when grief is too much to bear, when no reason can be found, it is her face we imagine so that pain has shape. Because to give sorrow a monster is in some strange way to survive it. In the coldest corners of North America, where snow never melts and the trees whisper with hunger, there is a creature feared more than wolves, storms, or the dark. They call it the Wendigo, a name that chills even the bravest hunters. I first heard it in a remote part of Quebec. An old man, weathered and silent, pointed to the pines and simply said, "If you hear it call your name, run, even if it sounds like your mother." The Wendigo is no ordinary beast. It is hunger made flesh, a spirit of winter, of starvation, of cannibalism. It stalks not only the forests, but the soul. According to Algonquian legend, the Wendigo was once human, a person who in the depths of famine broke the ultimate taboo. They ate the flesh of another. But instead of dying from shame, they changed. The Wendigo becomes impossibly tall, emaciated. Its skin stretches tight over bones. Its mouth never closes. Its hunger never fades. And the more it eats, the hungrier it grows. Some say it has the head of a deer skull-like with hollow eyes and twisted antlers. Others say it shifts shape, appearing like a loved one in the fog. But always beneath the illusion, there is one thing: the hunger. What horrifies me most about the Wendigo isn't the gore. It's the idea that you might become it, that inside all of us buried deep is a breaking point. A line that once crossed changes you forever. I found an old fur trapper's journal in a Montreal archive. Its final pages were frozen and blood-smeared. The last words read, "It begged me, but I was colder than mercy." The Wendigo myth was not just a horror story, it was law. Among many First Nations, it was a warning, a teaching. In times of starvation, elders would remind children, "Do not become like the Wendigo. Do not eat what cannot be undone." Some tribes believed the spirit of the Wendigo could possess the living, infecting them with madness, whispering to them in the cold. There were rituals, exorcisms, in extreme cases, executions. This was not myth for entertainment. It was survival. It was the memory of real hunger passed down through generations. I spoke with a Cree woman near James Bay, who told me the Wendigo doesn't just walk in snow. It walks in your decisions. I asked what she meant. She said it comes when you stop seeing others as human. That stayed with me, because the Wendigo is more than a beast, it is metaphor. For greed, for isolation, for the kind of hunger that eats not just food, but morality. In colonial times, missionaries dismissed the Wendigo stories as superstition, but even they noted strange disappearances in the woods. Even they reported unholy things in the snow. In the 1800s, there were real court cases people tried for Wendigo psychosis. Men who claimed they felt a growing urge to consume, who swore they saw eyes in the trees calling them home. One man's swift runner confessed to killing and eating his family after a particularly harsh winter. He said the Wendigo came to him in dreams, and that when he woke, he was already chewing. The Wendigo is not dead. Its legend has changed, yes, mutated into pop culture horrors. But the core remains as if hunger that devours the self. In today's world, the Wendigo feels more relevant than ever. It's in the endless craving for more. More wealth, more control, more consumption without care. We may not eat flesh, but we eat futures. We devour forests, we forget community in favor of survival. And in that forgetting, the Wendigo smiles. I hiked once into a boreal forest near midnight. Not to tempt fate, but to feel the quiet. And there, under stars that burned like ice, I swear I felt it. Not a monster, but a presence. A cold whisper. What would you do to survive? And I couldn't answer. Because deep down, I knew we all have a breaking point. The Wendigo is not about teeth and claws, it's about thresholds. And the horror of realizing you've already crossed it. So if you ever find yourself lost in the northern woods, and you feel something watching and you hear your name spoken in the voice of someone you love, do not follow. Do not eat. Do not forget who you are. Because once the hunger knows your name, it never lets go. 10 creatures, 10 paths through shadow, 10 stories that echo not just through folklore, but through us. From the dream-eating Baku of Japan to the monstrous hunger of the Wendigo. Each myth is more than a tale. It is a mirror. What we fear, what we regret, what we hope never to become. As I look back on this journey through the haunted night,
I realize these creatures, strange and terrifying as they are, speak not only of darkness, but of understanding. They are born not from nowhere, but from memory, sorrow, silence, and survival.
The Baku of Japan tells us that even our nightmares deserve attention because fear, when named, can be released. The Mythical reminds us that the forgotten, especially the small voiceless ones, do not remain silent forever. The Black Shuck walks beside grief. It is not always a curse but a companion, a presence that says, you are not alone in mourning. The Shuffwa Drakara teaches that hatred, bitterness, and the refusal to let go can bind us to this world long after we're meant to rest. The Wampus cat is fury transformed, a curse and a question. What happens when power is denied and pain is buried beneath silence? The Yuliger haunts the lonely, not because they are weak, but because sorrow untended becomes something sharp, something watching. The Chush Segwa punishes lust and betrayal. But perhaps more importantly, she reflects how beauty can be both weapon and warning. She asks us to look deeper always. The Lamashtu gives form to one of humanity's greatest vulnerabilities, love that can be taken too soon. She is not just evil, she is grief personified when no reason can be found. The Wendigo is not only about winter and flesh. It is the warning that greed has no end, that consuming for the sake of survival alone will leave us hollow.
And what ties them all together?
Silence, shame, unseen pain. These creatures do not rise from nowhere. They rise from us, from things we bury, from truths we fear. And maybe that is why they haunt the night, because during the day we are too busy pretending they don't exist. What makes myths powerful is not their accuracy, but their resonance. A mother whispers a chant passed down from generations, not because she believes in demons, but because it feels like protection. A traveler avoids a path not because of claws, but because something in their gut says, not tonight. A child dreams of a monster and their parents light a candle not to chase it away, but to remind the child, you are seen. And sometimes that's enough. The monsters we carry are real. They are heartbreak, rage, fear, guilt. And stories, especially old ones, give us a way to hold them without being consumed. I didn't expect to change while researching this series, but I did. Because each legend spoke to something unspoken in me. I remembered the dreams I used to run from, the silences I once used as armor, the fears I inherited and never questioned.
And maybe that's what folklore is really for.
Not just to scare us, not just to entertain, but to remember, to connect, to endure. So here at the end of this long trail of shadows, I ask you this. Which creature stayed with you? Was it the Wendigo who asks how far you'd go to survive? The Myling who cries for a name? The Segwa who waits to see if you'll look past the surface? Or maybe it's one you've never heard of before, but somehow you've always known. Because monsters are not always evil. Sometimes they are truth. Truth we could not speak aloud, so we shaped it with horns, feathers, and claws.
And now we pass it on.
So that others may understand. So that others may see. And in doing so, perhaps the monsters finally rest. Thank you for walking this path with me, for listening, for remembering.
If you have a legend where you live one that haunted your childhood or shaped your dreams, I'd love to hear it.
After all, the night is long, and stories are the light we carry through it.
Which creature from this journey haunts your thoughts the most? Let me know in the comments below.